Warning, this video is going to contain minor and major spoilers for Final Fantasy VII as well as its remake and Crisis Core. Before we jump into the video, I just want to thank Retro Gaming Wear for joining me in this video. Stick around to the end of the video to find out how you can save 10% off on t-shirts, sweatshirts, sweaters, or face masks. Thank you again to Retro Gaming Wear. Final Fantasy VII is a game that lives a legacy that continues to stand to this day. The game lives a legacy that most modern games hope to achieve one day, and yet, the original game has always had something wrong to me. This is all subjective, of course, and I know this game is a masterpiece, and most media outlets know the game is a masterpiece, but there's something wrong with me personally, which I hope to discuss in this video. Speaking of which, in this video, the main point of it is to describe what the Final Fantasy VII Remake did to a new fan like me, and why I feel it doesn't hurt the original game, like every fan of the original game would have you believe. Let's start with some background information on me as a person. To talk about my problem is to address a huge elephant in the room. So take this mouth-breathing, knuckle-dragging moron, also known as a video game collector, who somehow managed to be a father. Wrap your head around that. This idiot owns Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, Persona 4, 2 copies of Persona 5, Disgaea on PSP, and Chrono Trigger digitally on the PS Vita. What is the problem with this, though? Well, at the time, this goblin here has never completed a single one of these, nor has he gotten close to finishing them. To break it down in layman's terms, this gremlin here has spent roughly $140 on video games that he hasn't put more than maybe 2 hours into.
To be fair, I played Persona 5 on the PS3 first, got about 20 hours into it, and got stuck on the second boss, and because I didn't make extra save slots because I'm not used to doing that, I could not get past it. I didn't have enough healing items, just things were an issue. And the only way to get past that was to just start the game over again and go through about 10 to 15 hours of tutorials all over again just to get to the same spot and maybe scrape by again, and I just didn't have the patience to do that.
I'll just let this cave creature explain himself.
My main issues with RPGs is I never feel like I am in control of the character. I always just feel like some benevolent force telling what the character needs to do, and all the menu navigation just gets really confusing and overwhelming after a while. It just, when I look at a game and it has just a menu option hidden within a menu option and hidden in within a menu option just to grab a potion to heal somebody by 200 health points, when on the next turn the enemy I'm fighting is going to do well over 200 health points, it's just too complicated for my stupid orc brain to understand. Something just doesn't click with me. I think the only reason I'm able to enjoy Pokemon as much as I do is because I feel like I'm actually controlling the character. You are the trainer telling the Pokemon what attack to do because that's just how it's set up in the game. So I'm able to trick myself into feeling like I am the trainer telling Bulbasaur to use Leech Seed, whereas opposed to, I feel like some benevolent force just telling Ryuji to use a sword slam. Like, it doesn't feel like he made the decision, it feels like some god made the decision for him. There's some weird disconnect. It doesn't click with me. I don't know. And that all comes down to game feel. I like games where when I push a button, it happens. Take a Mario, I push a button to jump, he jumps. Doom, I pull the trigger, he shoots that trigger, and the sound effects help a lot to accentuate what I'm feeling in the game necessarily. Like, back to Doom Eternal, when you shoot the shotgun makes that really good sound crunch of the shotgun going off and shooting a demon. I felt like I did that. Whereas in an RPG, you're scrolling through menu navigations, listening to the little arrow prompt to make its noises, and then it goes over here or whatever to select an attack. And then once you do that, then you watch an animation play out. It doesn't feel like I hit the A button and something happened right from hitting the A button. It feels like I hit the A button, I hit it again to select an option, and then I sit there and wait for an animation to play out to tell me how much damage I did.
So what does this have to do with Final Fantasy VII Remake? It's pretty obvious given the examples just presented. The game lets this knuckle-dragging moron mash a button and control each character individually in a more action-oriented RPG. The problem with the original in my eyes is how daunting of a task it feels like to even attempt to play it. When I hear a game is a JRPG with menu navigation and a story that lasts well over 40 hours to even 60 hours, I get a little intimidated by it. On the opposite end, when I hear there's an action RPG with a story that lasts over 40 hours and there's not a lot of menu navigation and it's fairly straightforward, I'm intrigued. That's what sold me on the remake of Final Fantasy VII. I always wanted to play the game, but was just way too intimidated by its length, the gameplay, and just the overwhelming sense that I wouldn't be playing the game right. I was initially scared off by the remake at first. All I kept hearing from fans of the original is how it ruined the story and changed too much. And it's only the Midgar section of the story, which to clarify is about 4 to 8 hours of the original, and yet somehow they're going to sell this to us at $60 and swear it's over 30 hours long. I started to worry that maybe this was the wrong way to experience the story in the world. And maybe they did change too much, because after all, How do you take something that's at most 8 hours and stretch it into a 30-hour game? How much of the story was going to be drawn out? How many times would the game make wandering around aimlessly, looking for some objective to complete, quantify as gameplay? I also kept hearing that Sephiroth, the big bad guy from the original game that shows up pretty much out of nowhere in the original, shows up way too much in the remake, and it feels more like fan service than anything else. All of these things put me off from the remake for a while. It wasn't until late last year where the game went on sale for $30 as opposed to the $60, and I thought, you know what, let me try it. So I did. And what did I think? Someone who's completely new to the world of Final Fantasy VII, experiencing it for the first time the way people continue to say is the wrong way. I fucking adored it. Everything from the visuals to the combat, the new reworked and revamped soundtrack, everything clicked with my puny goblin brain. There are things I didn't like about it and can agree they are probably handled better in the original, but even still, the good outweighs the bad in my opinion at least. The game itself continues to tell pretty much the same story up until the last quarter of the game, and I feel it does a really good job fleshing out the more interesting sites in Midgar that we don't get to see in the original. I feel like the side characters like Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge were more fun, and I feel like you got to know them better. Tifa's the best thing and must be protected at all costs. Barrett is probably my favorite sidekick, and Aerith is just so likable in Cloud, they actually made him feel like a person to me. The only thing I knew about Cloud is that he's just an edgy sad boy, at least that's what growing up with Newgrounds Flash cartoons taught me. But here, I feel for him. His demeanor just being so standoffish and just how awkward he is seems strange at first until you start to fill in the gaps that he probably has a really dark history and just doesn't know how to cope with it all. The complaint of Sephiroth showing up more is a true one though, but the reason he does this makes sense towards the end of the game. I genuinely feel like this game was worth my time and cannot wait for part 2 to come out hopefully this decade. This will probably be a significantly shorter section because to me personally, I don't really have a whole lot I didn't like about the game. The gameplay complaint that I hear a lot is that your AI-controlled partners are brain dead and don't help in battles. While I do feel this is true, the problem with that complaint is that you're just not playing the game to its fullest capabilities then. Your partners are AI-controlled, sure, but you're supposed to be constantly switching back and forth between them to do various things, whether it's to heal yourself, heal other players, activate their limit breaks, or simply just to distract the enemy so Cloud can get in there and do a big strong attack that will stagger the enemy. A complaint I can agree with, however, is making the sewers and train graveyard parts longer. When I say sewer part, I don't mean the part where you're doing a mission with Don Corneo's bodyguard. I actually like that part. The part I'm referring to is when you and Aerith are trying to get back from Sector 5 to Sector 7, and you use those underground tunnels and have to do those stupid mechanical hand puzzles so that she can get across. These sections really felt like filler to me, and from someone who's never played the original, if it's that obvious to someone new, I can't imagine what it's like to a veteran. The train graveyard section where you're trying to free a ghost of a child or some shit just goes on for too long, and it feels really unnecessary, especially when right beforehand you're told that the enemy plans to wipe out the entirety of Sector 7 without giving any evacuation notice. This feels so out of place and could have been either cut or shortened quite a lot. Alright, let's get into the big shit now. Sephiroth showing up too much. To be honest, I didn't really care about it, but when he was just standing there taunting Cloud literally an hour and a half in, I felt it was a little unnecessary. As you play through the game, however, I feel he starts cropping up less and less, and by the end of the game, it all made sense to me. So here we're gonna get into some spoiler territory, so if you don't want it, stop the video now and play the game for yourself. I'll have my final opinions on it at the end, but the gist of it is that I really loved this game. Alright, so the reason Sephiroth is showing up so much just to screw with Cloud is because he knows that he loses to Cloud. He knows what events unfold in the original game and is fighting fate to not let that happen again. That's what all those ghosts are flying around in the game and preventing certain things from happening, i.e. when Sephiroth impales Barrett. It wasn't his time to go, so fate wouldn't let him go. The planet in Final Fantasy VII is kind of its own character. It has its own defense systems, so if somebody messes with the planet is going to fight back in retaliation. That being said, the universe also has its own defense mechanisms in the way of these ghosts, whereas these ghosts make sure events from the original play out the same way they did back in 1997, and Sephiroth is trying to change that. Sephiroth knows this and singles out Cloud, baiting him to take him on to change fate. This means some characters lived through the Sector 7 event that didn't in the original. All we know so far is that Biggs is alive and shouldn't be, and now Zack is alive as well. Yeah, Zack. Alright, slight tangent. He was the main character in Crisis Core, a prequel to the events that happened in Final Fantasy VII, 7 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII. At the end of the game, he's gunned down, and that's where his story ends, and he gives the Buster Sword to Cloud. But in this game, because Sephiroth changed fate itself, therefore altering the past, Zack managed to make it out alive. What that spells for the next game, I have no clue, but if one thing is for sure, I feel as though the story is going to take a wildly different turn than what happened in the original, which is a good or bad thing depending on your interpretation. For someone experiencing this world for the first time, this doesn't mean too much to me, but for old fans who probably wanted a one-to-one remake of the original game, I can understand the disappointment. Where to begin to conclude this video? Well, I really enjoyed this game a lot and have decided to try out more RPGs and not be as intimidated as before. Recently, I beat the first Kingdom Hearts with my fiance and we had a blast. I also went back and finished Crisis Core, and apart from some annoying enemies that do way more damage than they need to, I really loved that one too. Also, for our anniversary and Valentine's Day, my fiance also got me Final Fantasy X and X-2 on the Switch, which is a turn-based RPG and I usually would be intimidated by, but I'm actually excited to try it out and start it. My point is, if you're in a very specific and niche group like me, give this game a shot. It might broaden your horizons, or it might not do anything for you, but at least give it a shot. One day, I will play through the original game and see what I was missing, but until then, I have the Final Fantasy VII Remake to thank for getting me interested into this entire genre of game that I had a very hard time getting into.
To hop on what I just said in the voiceover, I'm about 15 hours through X1, and I'm really enjoying my time. I finished Crisis Core about a week ago. Loved this. This was honestly a lot better than I thought it would be. I only played 2 hours of it when I first got it because I didn't understand what was happening. But once I got through the remake and was able to kind of pick up on what was going on, I've really enjoyed this one. Zack is probably one of my favorite protagonists so far from one of these RPGs. But as far as X goes, I'm really enjoying Final Fantasy X, 10, whatever. I'm really enjoying Final Fantasy X. I plan on getting through it. I plan on taking a break instead of hopping right into X2, because I feel like after I get through X, depending on how long it takes me, I might get burnt out, so I don't want to burn myself out. I kind of want to go back and play Resident Evil 4 for some reason. Like, I'm really feeling Resi 4, but hopefully this opens up my RPG horizons, and I'm happy to say that I owe the Final Fantasy VII Remake to that. So, yeah, it's a good game. Give it a shot, please. And now, as you heard from the beginning of the video, I have a sponsorship deal. This video is brought to... As stated in the beginning of this video is brought to you by Retro Gaming Wear. They're a small company who makes retro-styled shirts like this one here. I'm personally wearing the original Game Boy shirt. They're very comfy. These prints are fantastic. I'm really impressed with the quality of the prints, to be honest with you. I think they're really high quality and really good. The shirts aren't that expensive either. It's, I think, $24 for a shirt, something around there. I'll double check it and put an asterisk here if I'm wrong, or to put the exact price. I think it's like $24.99. Hopefully I'm right. If you go into the description and use the link down there and use promo code TrentAki, all in capital, you'll get 10% off your order. But yeah, thank you to Retro Gaming Wear for reaching out to me. Completely out of nowhere, actually. That was really cool. But thank you so much for reaching out to me, and yeah, see you next time. That's the end of this. Buy a shirt.